Hi, this is Rick Carlson, and this is my Time Traveler presentation. For my presentation, I am an African American male in Philadelphia in 1867. So we're going to take a look back and see what it was like. Start out with a little bit about my family. My family history is that as a college age African American student in 1867, my family history is overflowing with not only life changing circumstances such as slavery, the Civil War, and the experience of a continued divide and racial tension, but the positive opportunity to expand on land ownership, education, and even freedom for the first time in the country's existence. Many of my family members have not been together through much of my childhood. They were working as slaves on different plantations spread across many different states. Some of them have run away and tried to make it to some northern states to escape the slave life and try and start a new life for future generations. I have had others that have joined the Union Army in order to fight for the rights of fellow African Americans and abolish slavery altogether. Much of my family is uneducated in the traditional sense of school and had almost no forms of higher education. My current family structure. I am a 16-year-old African American male that is the only child of two ex-slaves that ran to freedom through the Underground Railroad when I was only a child. My father fought for the right to fight in the Civil War in order to abolish slavery so that our family could live free and I could grow up in a country that treats all its citizens as equal and free men. My mother and father both worked on southern plantations, but wanted a better life and future for me, so they risked everything and escaped to the north and ended up in Philadelphia. This is not the normal situation for other African American families that I see, though. The biggest factor is that there really is no normal that I can tell. Some of my friends have brothers and sisters that range from infants to teenagers, and other friends have family with a lot of brothers and sisters that are not living with them and they have not seen in many years due to being slaves and having their families broken up. I guess there's not really a typical family structure. After the Civil War, the country began to open segregated, white-operated hospitals that began to care for freed slaves and evident health concerns resulting from years of slave life. Although they admitted only black patients, these separate but equal hospitals were often inadequate, provided substandard care, and rarely provided employment for black physicians or nurses. As more African Americans obtained medical degrees, black physicians began to respond to racism in American medicine by forming their own medical institutions, teaching hospitals, and medical societies. One of the first to open was Frederick Douglass Memorial Hospital and Training School in Philadelphia. The hospital cared for, employed, and trained the specific needs of African American patients. This was the first of its kind in the U.S. Prior to 1867, much of the population of African Americans fled to the north with the lure of employment opportunities. This, however, became a problem within itself. Between 1830 and 1860, the population of Philadelphia almost doubled, with the highest concentration of growth in South Philadelphia, due in large part to its reputation as an effervescent political, cultural, and economics that was much more welcoming for African Americans and Philadelphia. True to its anti-slavery reputation, became a major stop on the Underground Railroad. However, as the promise of a vibrant workforce rejuvenated many African Americans, the reality of a sudden overpopulation and conflict with other foreigners resulted in new but very familiar jobs and working conditions. The largest contingent of work was physically demanding, minimally skilled, and low paying, with very few jobs for African Americans in fields such as caterer, barber, minister, doctor, or teacher. This coupled with the competition from middle-class whites and Irish immigrants who were also looked down on as second-class citizens. All this resulted in a lack of sustainable work for the masses. I was part of the First Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia. The church at the time was going through some changes and trying to adapt to a different form of belief that were and the different forms of belief congregating within the church due to the slight differences in southern and northern forms of religious belief. The basic melting pot of Christian, Northern and Southern Baptist, Northern and Southern Presbyterian, and some other outlying faiths were all coming together to shape the direction of the church and its community. In the end, the strength of the First African Presbyterian Church, the nation's oldest African American Presbyterian church, located in Philadelphia, bonded the community and educated many future Christian ministers. I am being educated in the Institute for Colored Youth, also known as the ICY. The ICY school was funded by two Quaker men that left the money in their will to provide the financial support for the school. It is an excellent building for school, 3 stories high. It has tall, large halls for classrooms. The primary departments are on the first floor, the academic on the second, and the third story are recitation rooms with blackboards all around. I didn't even know at the time, but the Institute for Colored Youth would eventually become the Cheyney University of Pennsylvania. Cheyney University of Pennsylvania is the first historical black university in America. Although the name and location has been changed many times, its mission has remained the same as the founder, Richard Humphreys, one of the two Quaker men, wrote in his will and charged 13 fellow Quakers to begin an institution for, and I quote, to instruct the descendants of the African race in school learning, in the various branches of the mechanic arts, trades, and agriculture, in order to prepare and fit and qualify them to act as teachers, unquote. Philadelphia in 1867 is a year and place of great social, political, and changing economic landscapes. A couple of years removed from the Civil War, the notion that slavery has been abolished sounds good in a presidential address. However, it was very different in the daily lives of many black Americans. With the Union's victory in the passage in 1865 of the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution that abolished slavery and involuntary servitude except as punishment for a crime, freedom was believed to have arrived along with the belief that rights guaranteed by the Constitution finally would be realized in the African American community. This was a historical achievement in the Underground Railroad and the vigilance committees would no longer be necessary. African Americans began building upon established communities, businesses, churches, and benevolent organizations that would enable equality in the face of current hostilities. However, segregated streetcar transportation was the order of the day, meaning that black men and women were still not permitted to ride. On March 25, 1867, 3 days after the General Assembly of Pennsylvania passed a bill desegregating streetcars, Caroline LaCourte, a teacher in Philadelphia's public schools, and Octavius Cotto's fiancée attempted to enter a car at 9th and Lombard Street. The conductor rudely told her that African Americans were not allowed to ride, but LaCourte refused to let the matter drop. She first went to a local magistrate, for whom she received no satisfaction. Since the office of the Secretary of the Commonwealth was located at the time in Philadelphia, the court next took the matter to the office to obtain a copy of the legislation, which he presented to the magistrate with Cotto acting as legal advisor. Together, they became the face of the fight for equal rights in Philadelphia. Their determination resulted in the conductor's arrest and $100 fine, as well as having secured the right of blacks to ride Philadelphia's public streetcars. As a student at the time, and having been educated at the ICY under Octavius Cotto at the Institute for Colored Youth, this resonated very deep with me. It involved a goal in what I wanted for my future and gave me a hero to model my life after. His example of standing up for what I believe in and having the ability through education to accomplish it was a movement forming action. This gave people in Philadelphia a leader and movement to support. Today, African American males have many more opportunities than I did in 1867. The ability to be a doctor, lawyer, teacher, professor, athlete, military leader, the list goes on and on. One of the most impactful people in African American history, Octavius Cotto, has been immortalized as a statue in Philadelphia. It is a reminder of the fight and struggle that forged the path for future generations and of the sacrifice others have made in the name of equal rights. And this concludes my presentation. Here's a list of my references, and thank you.